Hi everyone, Dean Mawson here from the podcast The Only Way is Ethics. We have Kaye Reynolds with us, and we're going to be chatting about digital health and clinical risk management topics during episode 2. Welcome, Kaye. Thank you for joining us. And it'd be really good to for the audience to learn a bit about you and your role. I know we've known each other now for a couple of years and have worked alongside each other. But yeah, I'll let you go ahead and tell everyone about you, and then we'll crack on and have a chat.
My name's Kaye Reynolds. I'm a qualified nurse. I registered qualified in 2011, and clinically I work predominantly as a chemotherapy nurse for 10 years, but also on an oncology, haematology and palliative care ward. So that's my kind of clinical background. In October 2021, became the full-time clinical safety officer for my trust. I'm also studying part-time for my MSc, my master's degree in digital health, which I have to say I have found really, really valuable to kind of expand my knowledge, learning, reading of anything digital health. I think it can be quite easy to become a bit blinkered and focused on certain elements, especially when it's your job. So actually having that guided course to kind of improve my general knowledge and awareness around digital health has been really valuable for my role. I'm also part of the BCS, so the British Computer Society. I'm a member of that organisation, and also, along with yourself, Dean, sit on the Clinical Safety Special Interest Group Leadership Panel, which is a really fantastic experience for me to get more exposure to more experienced people that work in the field, which is really valuable for my learning and development. I've also been involved in helping to establish a clinical safety officer council for the digital health networks, which we announced just last month, which is obviously in its infancy still, but the idea is that we'll hopefully be able to develop that into one of the advisory panels, which the digital health networks currently have for CCIOs, CNIOs, and CIOs. We thought we needed another C something O, so we've got the CSO Council.
Yes, another C-suite.
Oh yes, which is fantastic, because we know actually that the amount of clinical safety officers that we've got out in the community now that need that support and guidance, and it's just great to have that forum to kind of go and discuss. I have also established and I host a regular first Thursday of every month via Teams, a clinical safety officer coffee and chat forum, which again has been a fantastic learning experience. When I first came into my clinical safety role, I have to say I was very much, it was a very steep learning curve, and I didn't really know where to go or what to do with regards to getting advice or support. It was a new role within my organisation. So I kind of sat there one day and I thought, I can't be the only person that's trying to figure this out. There must be other people that are doing this. So kind of just reached out via different networks, LinkedIn, the Digital Health CSO discourse, all sorts of different channels to try and make connections with people that are already doing this job. And I actually found there was a real community of people out there, but they weren't talking to each other, because I think we weren't all aware that we were all doing the same thing, but in different places. So I thought, why not try and get everybody to meet together even just once a month, start making those connections and talking to each other. So I established that in February 2023. So we've had 17 calls now, which is amazing. And the attendance has just been phenomenal. I mean, I don't think I anticipated that we'd have the kind of amount of people joining us that we do every month. So we started off with maybe 20 people on the call the first few months, but now we regularly get around the 80 people mark every month joining. So I think it shows that everybody wants to share that learning, share that knowledge, experiences, and support clinical safety officers out there, because we're all doing the same thing, whether we work for Sorry, go on, Dean.
No, absolutely. No, absolutely fantastic, Kate. And so what would you say the membership? I know we have sort of like
Yeah.
70 to 80 people, but I know personally that the membership for that has grown exponentially. So what sort of numbers are we looking at in relation to that?
Yeah, so on the invite now, we're around 300 people that have
Oh,
requested
right.
invite.
Wow.
Yeah, and we have a futures page, NHS futures page, where we can also collaborate and share documentation. And we're very nearly, I think we're about 2 people away from 200 members on the futures page as well now, which is amazing.
That's fantastic. And
Yeah.
dare I say that that's the biggest clinical safety officer forum in the UK at present.
For the Teams meet, the coffee and chat, I think
For the
for, yeah,
coffee and
for
chat.
like a,
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
I think so. I'm not aware of others that are specifically for clinical safety.
No.
I know there are other forums out there for kind of general digital debates and discussions, but I think for that kind of clinical safety focus, yeah, I believe so.
Thank you. I want to rewind
Hmm.
slightly. And
Of
it's
course.
absolutely fantastic to see sort of like, I know we've known each other for sort of, a couple of years. And, I remember our first conversation, our first chat was leading up to the inaugural CSO Coffee and Chat.
Hmm.
And giving you some sort of some guidance on that. I'm really
Yeah.
excited to see that, and to see you in action as well, Kay. And that for someone that's so at that point that you said was sort of quite junior in your role.
Yeah.
You've taken the reins in relation to that the CSO Coffee and Chat, and you've run with it, and it's been absolutely fantastic to see that grow, to see your confidence grow as well as a CSO, and to be able to bring the coffee and chat to the community, and allow people to have a voice in a safe space as well, because I think that's really important for us as clinicians and as clinical safety officers to be able to do that. And I know it's a big passion of mine as well, around raising that awareness across the UK. And I say the UK, I know we're NHS England, but the standards, and we will come on to chat about sort of like about those as well, are it it looks like they are going to be adopted across sort of potentially Scotland and Wales as well, and it'd be great to see that in Northern Ireland as well. And I think there's some roads being made already in that respect. And these forums for me are absolutely gold dust. And I know we'd spoken about this before, but would you like to see sort of more regional sort of forums that are for health organisations? I know there is the East of England Regional CSO Forum. There's the Southwest Regional Forum as well, but I'm not sure there are any others. And I think it would be really good to see, and that's not taking anything away from obviously from Coffee and Chat, because it's absolutely fantastic. But I suppose what I'm trying to say is, where is in NHS England in all of this, and what are they doing to support this moving forward? So I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, 100%. So we're fortunate, like you say, in the East of England, where I am, we're fortunate that we have a clinical safety officer network, which was established by our regional CNIO. And I think, like you say, there is one on the south coast. I don't know if there's one up north, kind of Yorkshire way. I'm not sure. I think there was. I'm not sure if it's still running. But no, I think so for me, the coffee and chat is about that collaboration. It's that safe space for manufacturers, independent clinical safety officers, and NHS clinical safety officers to kind of get together in that safe space and talk about the problems that we're facing on a daily basis. The regional networks, I believe, are more for that kind of more formal escalation of concerns we've noticed across the region. So having our regional CNIO, who obviously feeds into the national CNIO, actually provides us with that escalation chain, which is really useful. So I think there's a place for both. And obviously within the regional networks, ours is obviously specifically for those that work within the NHS. So potentially that would allow you to speak more freely if you have concerns about specific things that you might not want to do on a wider forum when you're not sure who may be there listening in. So I think having both, they complement each other really well. You've got that safe space to escalate concerns that you know will be raised nationally within the NHS, but then you've also got that less formal route to kind of discuss those common problems that we're all facing and get that support from other people that are having the same challenges as yourself.
Yeah, and I think it's really great news. You spoke about the Digital Health Network and
Yeah.
the commencement of the CSO channel in relation to that, which is absolutely fantastic. And I think that is the first steps in relation to, because potentially what will happen now is that we can start the conversations on that channel around trying to take forward that regional the regional forums and asking questions around how do people feel that would work, because obviously, like you've alluded to as well, that's the more formal channels then, isn't it, that's been set up, and it gives people, like you say, the opportunity to be able to raise those questions, raise those concerns, and hopefully get that in front of sort of, the digital clinical safety team, potentially within NHS England, to be able to sort of answer some of those burning questions, and maybe it gives us a bit more of a focus in relation to clinical risk management, because I feel that that's something that we're lacking at the moment.
Yeah, I will just say there though, Dean, I do think the central team, I mean the central clinical safety team at NHS England have also been really supportive of the Coffee and Chat forum, because I think they can see the value of actually that community voice and what issues we're finding on the ground. So yeah, they have been really supportive, and they've been really receptive if I've gone to them with any questions or queries that have been raised from the group. And I was invited recently to speak at their Digital Safety in Practice Day that they held in London, and talked about the community. So there's I think there is a real appreciation of the value of what the community can bring. But like you just said there, in the regional networks, going through that more formal kind of structure within NHSE, there's that potential to escalate concerns. And also, we've had real support with the community from the the interim CNIO for England. Helen Balston's also been really, really supportive of the value of these types of communities as well. So, yeah, I think it is supported really well, definitely.
No, absolutely, and you spoke about the sort of like the support from the digital clinical safety team of NHS England, who obviously I know quite a few sort of like members of that team. Have worked with them for a number of years, and they're absolutely amazing. What they're doing, they're still a small team, and it'd be lovely to see that team grow. They are too small, and we all know that, and that's not us doing them sort of an injustice.
No.
It would be great to see that. It'd be great to see that team grow, and they've got a tough job. They can't. They're not there. If people have got an expectation that they're there to assure all the the digital clinical sort of like systems that are out there and technologies, it's just far on impossible. And they do have a job to concentrate on those systems that are integrated with the spine and with NHS services, to make sure that they're safe in those integrations. It's great to know that we've got sort of like people out there that are sort of like very infused around clinical risk management and are sort of like paving the way really, in relation to how we move this forward. So sort of with that in mind, I'd like to come to sort of like your role within your organisation, and potentially some of the challenges you face, but also some of those good news stories as well. Like I said on episode one, this isn't all doom and gloom. and we need to sort of like, you know, promote clinical risk management in a positive way. We both know the standards inside and out, you know, DCB 0129 and 160, the bane of our lives, and can be difficult at times, but it just leading into sort of like, you know, and I know we've spoken about this before around sort of, you know, the quality of documentation in relation to the standards, you know. So we have our usual suspects: the hazard log, safety case report, clinical risk management plan, but it would be good to get sort of, you know, your view around like the challenges you have, because, you know, you are one person, with sort of part of a team, but ultimately you are the clinical safety officer for your trust. So yeah, it'd be good to get your views.
Yeah, like you say, being the only one, obviously there are other people within the organisation that have done their clinical safety training, but that's often kind of in addition to the role that they're currently doing within digital. So the clinical safety element tends to fall, and I think you find this in a lot of organisations, to one or two individuals, two if you're very lucky, one the majority of the time. And sometimes it can be that clinical safety officer role, and we often see this, is tagged on to an additional role. So it could be tagged on to the CCIO or the CNIO. And we know from experience that that is nowhere near enough time, resource to kind of invest in this as a process. It is a time-consuming process, but it's a really valuable one as well. So I'm fortunate that clinical safety is my full-time role, and I can then obviously invest all of my time into that role and support with the development of the awareness, because I think that for me is a really key point, is the more people we make aware of the importance of clinical risk management with our digital systems. We talk about it all the time clinically, but not necessarily digital clinical, because for some reason, we still kind of, in my opinion, we still kind of have that differentiation between what's safe clinically. We risk assess before we do any kind of clinical procedure. We wouldn't even think twice about that. We know that's what we do in our clinical practice. But when we're using a digital system, we sometimes just need the guidance to say, actually, have you thought about how the use of this digital system can interact with the clinical workflow that you're using? So capacity and therefore raising awareness is essential. I think from an individual perspective, finding we have lots of systems that are projects in flight at the same time. We've got lots of systems going live in a short space of time. So capacity from that kind of aspect, it can be quite challenging. And then I find that it can be difficult to carve out time to go back and review things. You know, ideally you want to go back and review within a few months of go live, and then potentially a year or so later, and keep that regular review up. The documents are meant to be kept live throughout the life cycle of the health IT system as per the standards. We know that is best practice, and that's what we should be doing. But the capacity to do that alongside all of the new systems going live, alongside thinking about all the systems that are getting decommissioned, alongside the upgrades, the legacy systems, it can be overwhelming trying to juggle that kind of workload.
So what have you put into place, Kaye, within your organisation to sort of support you in that? I know, you know, you talk about, and we hear this a lot, don't we? Sort of like, you know, there's so many legacy systems that sort of, you know, that organisations have. I mean, on average, I think trusts have between 200 and 250 systems that they're dealing with at any one time. Obviously, with, you know, the latter stages of sort of EPR deployments that people are looking to decommission a lot of those systems. I was only speaking to Rob Knott last night. He was the chief commercial director for the Apollo project at Guy's and St Thomas's, and they actually decommissioned 69 systems by deploying Epic into the trusts for that project. And quite interestingly, he said the effort that was needed into the decommissioning of the systems was a lot greater than putting into the actual concentrating on the EPR deployment. And I was really interested actually chatting to him about that. And what a lot of people don't realise is that what should be happening with decommissioning is that from a clinical risk management perspective, that needs to be a separate project. In relation to your safety documentation, you need to have unique safety documentation for those projects. But obviously, when you're talking about 69 systems, how the hell do you approach that? Even I don't have all the answers for that, but there must be some sort of overall collective approach, because I'm sure there's a lot of duplication and replication in relation to those systems. But you're absolutely right in respect to it's a team effort in relation to that, and you've got to have that resourced. What is one person as a CSO? As we've spoken about before, I see us as facilitators. We are there to advise and guide. Yes, we're doers as well. We roll our sleeves up and have to do hazard log, safety coach reports, clinical risk management plans. But if we can move some of those tasks and activities on over to the team, because if you break it down in what we're actually doing, we are gathering evidence, we are gathering information, we're doing scope definition, we are looking at testing, training, business process, standard operating procedures, the system itself, technical functional specifications, business process modeling, and all the infographics and workflows that support that. All that information does not come from a clinical safety officer. And this is for the audience out there as well. It doesn't all come from us, where people may think within their organizations or wider that it's the CSO's responsibility and job to get all of this information. And just because a project gets switched on doesn't mean that when you assign a clinical safety officer to that project, all of a sudden they know everything about the system, and almost by osmosis they suck in all this information. We are not necessarily subject matter experts on every aspect of a system, and this is why it's so important to have that team in relation to that and tackling sort of like systems. Sorry, I'm going.
Yeah. No, you're fine. And I'd 100% agree with that, because I think there is that perception that, okay, so you deal with the clinical safety of these systems, therefore you know how they all work. But you've just said earlier on that actually most trusts, you believe, have between 2 and 250 systems. Now, I think we have more because we don't have an EPR at the moment. It's something we're in the process of deploying. However, I think we've got somewhere in the region of 300 plus systems. Now, as an individual, how could I possibly know each of those systems and how they work? I can't. So I rely really heavily on the people that use those systems day in, day out, because they are the experts in their systems. They know how they work. They know how they fit into the workflow. They know the kind of the pros and cons of the system, what works well. And when you talk to people that use systems on a daily basis, you will often hear, oh, well, we use this as a workaround, or this is how we use it because this works. Actually, that's the real nuggets of information that we need to know, because then we can think, okay, so if you're having to do this, this is making your job more difficult, this is potentially introducing an additional risk. What can we do to support you to make this workflow more efficient, safer, and therefore more effective for not just the organisation, but most importantly, safest for our patients? So those people that use the system on a daily basis, our nursing staff, our medical staff, our administrative staff, clerical, everybody that's involved in that process. And I think we can often forget this. It's not just about the doctors and the nurses that use the systems. Actually, there are so many people that have an input into that digital system, the information within there, the way they use it, that their input is so valuable to ensuring that we've got a really good process in place. So yeah, 100% teamwork, 100% cannot be a subject matter expert on every system, but definitely there is a facilitator to guide and suggest and use our experience from different systems as to how we can improve things for them and for our patients.
So taking that on board and us mentioning around sort of subject matter expertise.
Mhm.
So let's bring that back to clinical risk management and around subject matter expertise in that respect, because obviously, as we know, across the landscape, there is varying competency within the CSO community at the moment, which we know that's going to happen because there's new people coming on board. I think it's absolutely fantastic what's happening with the NHS England trainer program, and taking that to the regions to be responsible for training. It's going to have its ups and downs, as we know. You've been part of that program, Kaye,
I have.
firsthand. I've been exposed to some of that sort of some of the program as well, and I'm aware of it and fully supportive of that. Obviously, one of my concerns, and I have raised this both over LinkedIn and as part of the leadership committee for clinical safety at BCS, is around sort of what next. You know, it's all well and good training people, and I know we're going to come on to mentorship, but I'd like us to concentrate on the training. And it would be great to get sort of like your experience, having been firsthand part of that trainer pilot, and you know, to give your views on the direction really that you think that should be going, because I know you've also had NHS England come along to some of your own sort of evaluating your sessions as well, and you've been part of the community of interest sort of days as well. So really, I think at the moment you're best placed to sort of like to give an opinion on that, Kaye.
Sure. So yeah, I think, like you say, the Train the Trainer initiative is fantastic, and there are pros and cons to it. And we've heard and we've seen on, like you say, on platforms like LinkedIn that there are differing opinions. And I think when I went into the actual training for Train the Trainer, I wasn't sure what to expect. It wasn't a case of teaching us how to be clinical safety officers. It was teaching us how to teach, which is very different. And I really hadn't, I think, appreciated actually there's a real skill, there's a real technique to how you do this. And I think for me, that was my biggest takeaway from that 2-day residential course that we done at the University of York as part of that Train the Trainer program, was actually there's a real skill to how you teach, how you impart information, how you facilitate workshops. And that was really valuable information to kind of take away and then do at our own organisation. I think the comfort for us came from everybody felt, everyone kind of gets, I think, at some point, imposter syndrome. I don't really know what I'm doing. All of those doubts start to creep in. And I think that's quite normal. I hope it is, because I experience it quite a lot. It was really reassuring to know that actually when we delivered that first training session, there was somebody from the central team came to observe. There was no way did it feel like an exam or a test or, kind of, in that sense. It was very much there as a supportive role. If we had any questions, they were there to guide and support and help. And I think that reassurance of having somebody external to your organization come and observe how you're delivering the training was actually really valuable. And then to get feedback on that. And as part of the Train the Trainer training, there's lots of training there, that we've done at York, part of it was we had to deliver a presentation that was recorded, and then that video recording was played back and observations were made on your teaching style. If you were, for example, somebody that says a lot, it really kind of makes you aware of. It really is, when you kind of, I haven't watched mine back yet personally. We've been sent the files to watch, but I don't want to watch myself back. I know other people have.
We can pop it on the podcast.
No, we can't.
There's a link.
But I read the written feedback. But I think it's a really valuable tool to kind of see how, when you're teaching, how you kind of come across. So yeah, there's like we all, I think, acknowledge there is potentially a little bit of a way to go with regards to that kind of rounded training. But I think Train the Trainer is a really good example of how we can start to improve the capacity, because as we mentioned earlier, the central team is a very small team. Training is just part of what they do. And with the increased awareness and all of the digital health systems flooding the market, we need more of us to kind of make sure we can keep our patients safe. So yeah, from a personal experience of the Train the Trainer, the pilot, I'm hopeful that it won't just be a pilot. I'm hopeful that it will be something that they'll continue to kind of do. And also they're going to continue to monitor. So if we notice that people that we've trained from our organisation, NHS England have sight of that. They know who we've trained because our booking for our training goes through the central website still. So people will still book a place on the training course through them. If there's obviously, I guess, concerns around specific areas, then those kind of trends can kind of be picked up maybe. So I think it's good in the sense that there's that oversight still, and you're not kind of left to roam free.
Now that's really interesting. You talking about sort of like, so there's a record and there's a register, and you know where I'm going with this, of those that have been trained.
Yeah.
So, posing that question, and this is dear to my heart as well, around dare I say, a national register for clinical safety officers, and being able to make that happen. I've pushed for this, and we've had discussions as part of the leadership committee. There has been some pushback from lots of different people saying it wouldn't work. I disagree completely. I think it should be onerous at a regional level. For now, being very clear about this, because obviously the audience is wider than health organisations, I think the responsibility lies with the regions in relation to health organisations and the NHS trained clinical safety officers. However, it's how do we tackle the independent clinical safety officers? Now, lots of schools of thought in relation to that if you work for an organisation, that it's their responsibility to maintain that register. And I think also we are professionals. We are part of a professional register. So it's our responsibility within our professional registration to make sure that we maintain that register as well in relation to that. So I think if we come at all angles in relation to that, surely we could maintain a national register and also start thinking about the role of a clinical safety officer as a profession. When I say that we discussed this last week or the week before at the in-person. Time flies, Kaye. But at our group around competency and sort of like discussing that if we're going to be recognised as a profession, why can't this be something that is a clinical safety officer is an addition to our registrations, whether it be NMC, GMC, HCPC, in relation to that. How hard is that going to be to do? Now, I spoke to Wendy Deering, Professor Wendy Deering, at the BCS, and she said that now the best way to be able to do this, and it'd be really interesting to get those people, the audience that are listening and hopefully are going to comment, and to see their views on this and to give their advice and guidance, is that you need to tackle the educational institutions, the universities in relation to that, because if we're going to have that addition to registrations, then obviously there has to be a competency framework, and there has to be, the training has to be formal in relation to that, it's assessed, it's audited for its relevance in relation to clinical risk management, and that there's a core core competency and course agenda in relation to that. So it's really interesting, which leads us on to, we've spoken about training, and I've mentioned competency in relation to that. Now, I know I've done some work on the CSO competency framework, which is sitting with the leadership committee, and we need to push that forward to be reviewed. And again, putting this out there to everybody, we'd love input from the masses. It would be absolutely fantastic if we could all work together to create, because with my QMS quality management system hat on, work instructions and policies and procedures should be created by the people that are actually doing the stuff, not by top management that are sat there overlooking. It's I had a call with someone, I am therefore we are, a quote from someone this morning that I was talking to, Matthew Olson, which I had to write down in relation to that. So we have to take the initiative to actually get that competency framework out there ourselves and keep banging that drum. I don't know. I'll hand over to you for your views in relation to sort of competency as well. So,
I think 100%. I think there should be a competency framework. I think it's a really, really good idea. I think for me, like you've already kind of articulated, it's the case of how do we manage that? How is it introduced? We do have our own professional accountability, which is where I think within the standards, we need to be more specific about our registration for being a clinical safety officer should be with a regulatory body. So somebody who has the power to remove us from a register if we don't act accordingly to our level of competence. I think that is really important. And that is a real kind of part of the standards that I don't think are necessarily articulated very well, that probably could be done better. So yeah, training, competency, they're obviously very linked. We don't pass our driving test and then think we can, well, we do, we pass our driving test and think we can drive. We soon learn we can't. It's actually once you pass that test is then when you learn actually how to do things properly. So I think, there's a real gap still between passing and a kind of, you don't even really pass, you attend a study day and then you're competent, in inverted commas, to kind of go on and do that role. But actually, we've said this before, Dean, we would never do this with clinical staff. You don't pass your final exams to be a nurse or a doctor or a physio or an OT or a dietitian, and then out you go into the wild on your own. You have some support. So you need to be sure that the person that's doing that role is competent, because if not, I do think it can give you a false sense of security. It can make you think, oh, it's fine, a clinical safety officer has looked at that. But if a clinical safety officer has looked at it and hasn't actually done a robust assessment because they don't know how to, then we think we're using something that's safe and has been assessed when actually it hasn't been done to the kind of level that you would expect it to be done.
And it's very difficult, isn't it? Because I was at a certain point, I was very flippant about this and around sort of like, why aren't people competent? And if you're saying you're a clinical safety officer, then you should know what you're doing. But then, you have to take a step back and you have to look at the circumstance that people are in. And when you are involved at a certain level and you become part of a leadership committee and you start getting involved with the actual the cogs within that wheel and how they turn, and the attitudes and what people have to deal with at individual organizations, and you start to see it's really difficult for certain organizations to establish competent CSOs, and also from the manufacturer side as well. When you've got startups that find it extremely difficult, they don't have the resourcing, they don't have the funds to be able to appoint internal CSOs, hence why they come out to the likes of us in relation to external advice, guidance and consultancy. But again, that comes at a cost as well. So it is really difficult. And I think what we need to do is try and embrace that as much as we can. If you are an organization that has a mature or an established clinical risk management process, I would implore the sort of like people out there that don't push back against sort of like manufacturers or the other way round as well, push back against health organizations, because I've seen it from both sides of the fence, and start sort of like saying, well, you know, we're 129 compliant, so that's our bit done. There you go. Or the other way round, saying, you know, you're not 1-2 compliant. We've got an established process for 160, etc. It's all around, you know, trying to work together. However, there are circumstances that, you know, I've seen recently, and you've probably been experienced that, is the attitudes of some manufacturers and the attitudes of some health organisations as well. That all they want to do is sort of say, well, we are compliant and here's our documentation, when there's a complete lack of appreciation. And I would say to those people, go and do your homework, actually go out there and read the standards and try and get an appreciation for what the standards mean and what they're trying to achieve in relation to your systems or the deployment of the systems in relation to that. I don't want to harp on about that too much, but no, it is a fine line, and we all understand that it's a difficult job as well. And what we're doing, ultimately, we can't lose sight of the patient in relation to that. And we need to be cognizant that, you know, what we're actually trying to achieve is the reduction of risk of harm to an acceptable level to our patients in relation to that. Kaye, we have addressed a number of issues, and we've had a really good chat about sort of, you know, clinical risk management, your experiences in relation to that within your organisation. It's been absolutely fantastic talking to you. We will obviously want to invite you back because we've got more questions to talk through. But it's been lots more, but it's been really, really great speaking to you on episode 2. You're our first guest, which is absolutely fantastic. And we've got a big list of people that we're going to be speaking to, and I'm sure we're going to have lots to talk about as well. Thank you ever so much for taking your time to come and speak with us on The Only Way is Ethics. And we'll be speaking sort of like shortly anyway. So to everybody out there, I hope you enjoyed it, because if you're listening to me now, you've listened to me and Kaye warbling on. And for everybody, please send in your questions, send in your topics for us to discuss as part of the podcast. And if you want to be a guest as well, we'd love you to join us in the cabin or online to be able to discuss all things clinical risk management, and not just that, digital health topics as well. So again, thank you, Kaye, for joining us, and it's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, no, thank you ever so much for inviting me. It's been lovely talking to you. Thank you.